Yes, it's time, it's here. We're doing the best albums of the decade so far. A whole 50 of them, in fact. And if you haven't been keeping up with this channel, then you might have missed that last week I did the best songs of the decade so far. I did 50 of those too, so if you haven't watched that, please make sure you do. And also, I've been doing all kinds of 2020s content this decade so far. Throughout the entire year, I've been doing all kinds of tier lists and rankings and all this kind of stuff, so please make sure you check out more of those videos, because there's been all kinds of 2020s so far stuff. Just the one thing I hadn't thought of doing was doing an actual ranked 50 list of just the actual best, in my opinion. And for some reason it took the pitchfork list to make me think, you know what, maybe I should do one of those too. So here we are, that's what we're gonna do. And yeah, please make sure you subscribe, support the content, man. You know, I always talk on this channel about how this isn't like a full-time thing for me, but I'm always so consistent with uploads. A lot of people I've been here since the start know that. A lot of people always praise me for the amount of videos I do. These take a lot of time. They take chunks out of my weekend. I'm not getting, paid for this, so please support the channel, follow me, share the videos around, and if you're feeling really generous and you really like what I do over here, then maybe even support me over on Patreon as well to keep this channel going and keep the videos coming at such a good rate. So yeah, we're on one of the big ones, boys. This is the best albums of the decade so far. I want to mention before we get going that I'm not going to put this in a particular order. I'm just going to give you 50 albums that I think have been fantastic from this decade so far. I think a numerical order at this stage is a little pointless. I think midway through a decade, when there's like 5 more years, the numerical order by the time we get to 2030 is just going to be way different. So I just don't really see the point in putting it in this is number 25, this is number 24, whatever, well, yada yada yada. At this stage, I don't see the point of that. Fair play to you if you do that, that's okay, it's your entire choice, but for me personally, I don't really think there's any real reason to do that. So what we are going to do, we're going to go with 10 albums per year from the decade, which will be 50 altogether, and for each year I'm going to go into more detail and more in-depth talk with 5 of them, and then the other 5 from that year are just going to be kind of plastered on screen for you to see. So we're going to get 10 per year, 50 altogether, and yeah, that is it basically. We're going to just start from 2020, work our way to 2024. Let's go with the 2020 albums. Natalia Lafourcade, which I think some people will be thinking, out of the releases she's put out this decade, why this one? And that's a valid question, but for me personally, this one just hit the spot in a beautiful way, man. I absolutely adore her album from 2022, which I think people liked more because it was a bit more ambitious, it was a bit more extravagant, it was a bit more adventurous with how she structured some of the tracks. Great album, by the way, but for me personally, this is the one that just made me feel so joyous and lifted my spirits and just makes me feel so free. And it just reminds me of why I love music so much. This is just peak joyous whimsy and happiness, just basically all in an entire album. I adore this album, man. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It does have some re-renditions of like older songs that she'd done and then she put on this album, but the makings of them I just thought were really, really lovely, really, really full of life, just absolutely amazing. And I just think when I get to like, I don't know, my 50s, 60s, because I'm not there yet. If you think I'm old, I ain't there yet. I just think I'll be listening to this album and it'll just remind me of what made me fall in love with music in the first place. Like, yeah, it's not the first album I ever fell in love with, obviously, but it's just one of those albums that reminds me of why I absolutely adore listening to music. It just gives me that feeling. It'll never leave me. Adore this album. Natalia Lafourcade, one of the modern greats, by the way. Sensational stuff. Also, one of the greats, we're going to go with Fiona Apple. She is one of the all-timers in terms of singer-songwriters, and even so far into her career, guys, she's still dropping music that is absolutely decade best material. It's sensational stuff how she has got this longevity to her, and despite the fact that she's only got like what, 5 albums or something, it's never really hindered her, and the quality of the music that she puts out is just always so high. It's incredible stuff. The way she writes the lyrics on this album just feels so pointed and specific in such an incredible way. She talks about, oppression and abuse and just that like awful feeling of just not really having control and being kind of pushed down in such a way on this album. And she's always done it, but I just think some of the lyrical themes and ideas, tracks like Relay for example, I really find to be so incredible. Fetch the Ball Court is the title track as well. Yeah, it's amazing, this album. It's as good as everyone says. I know some people, when it first came out, it was getting rave reviews and people were like, it ain't that good, but I think it is just one of those albums that really is just that good for me personally. I want to mention Eve Toomer. Absolutely love this one. Gave it like a 7 out of 10 initially in my first review. If you've gone back to that review, you'll probably think it might be a bit dated now because some of the things I say I don't really stand by anymore, but I absolutely adore this album. It really grew on me. I love a grower. I love an album that I like to begin with but then just gets even better the more I go back to it. I always feel more attached to those albums because I feel like I'm making up for lost time for when I did like it, but then I'm listening to it again, I'm like, oh, I really love it now, and I'm just making up for the time I missed when I wasn't listening to it. And this is one of those albums for me. Just think it's so fantastic. Eve Toomer's like exploration into glam rock and some really cool like dreamy elements on this album too. There's just such a variety of sounds. The sound palette is insane on this thing. It feels so concise. The vocals are fantastic on tracks like Kerosene as well. The instrumentals are just phenomenal throughout. One of the best rock albums, rock adjacent albums of the decade so far, without a doubt. Yeah, Eve Toomer, one of a kind, really incredible performer. I think this is just such a great album. Spanish Love Songs, I love this one too. Spanish Love Songs, one of the best pop punk albums honestly I've ever heard. Now that might sound crazy, but to be honest, pop punk as a genre hasn't ever been a genre for me personally where like I've thought there's like an absolute bucket full of amazing albums. Like there's classics, you know, the greats from the 90s and 2000s that became so popular and became part of the Kerrang era are still fun. They've still got their moments in them, but the one thing I always felt that pop punk lacked generally was just that maturity, just that realism, just that, you know, focusing on how life really is, because pop punk as a genre can be a bit more playful, and that's fine. Playfulness is always good, but Spanish Love Songs just get real into the nitty gritty, into the deep here on this album, talking about depression, talking about like late stage capitalism, talking about how, you know, we're out here living paycheck to paycheck and we've never really, you know, are going to live the life we really want to live. It's a really depressing album in terms of the lyrics, but good God, the lyrics are just so incredibly well crafted. Adore this thing. Instrumentally, I think it's fantastic as well. It's anthemic. It's really up there, one of the best pop punk albums ever for me. Yeah, love it. And finally, for the more detailed one I want to go into is DJ Sabrina, the Teenage DJ, which I raved about this when it first came out. I still stand by it. I think this is an absolutely magnificent album. For an album that is so long, it never really wastes a moment. Every track just feels like it's seamlessly blending into the next and just never really ends, and it's just constantly that sugar rush of a high, listening to those really blissful, euphoric instrumentals. DJ Sabrina, I'm going to say they because the actual identity of DJ Sabrina is a little ambiguous, is a little unknown. I've heard they're a duo, I've heard it's just one person. I don't really know the actual ins and outs, if I'm being honest with you. But I like the mysteriousness of it. I think it adds to the music. I think it captures an essence in the style of music. I think it's really all part of the aesthetic. It really feels like a witch is just hidden in a hut somewhere, just cooking up music in her cauldron, and making potions and just putting it out for the world to see, and then she just runs away into the wilderness and disappears, and that's it. I just love that essence of what DJ Sabrina captures with the music. It sounds magical, it feels magical, the way the artworks always match the way the music feels. I just love that about them. I think I wouldn't really change that, to be honest. And yeah, I think the music is incredible as well. 2021 albums, want to mention Emily Steinwall. I mentioned her in the songs video and said a very similar thing there, where I just feel like this is an incredible talent that is somehow going way overlooked. Like, I couldn't believe it when I laid my ears on the first track when I played this album. I was just like, holy moly, this is just some random release on Bandcamp with amazing artwork, by the way, and just like where the hell has this come from? Barely any listeners, barely any recognition, barely any followers on social media. Like, how is there this insane voice, insane, massive scope of music that just goes so big and large, just not getting the ears on it? I was just absolutely blown away by this incredible stuff. Welcome to the Garden is an amazing track. Bloom, she sounds like a dove on that song. Honestly, the vocals are just so glorious, and the music matches it as well. Like, sometimes for me, a great singer can only go so far. I'm always appreciative of a fantastic voice, but when the music matches it, that's when it really matters. Like, yeah, you've got a great voice, but what else can you do? Well, Emily Slimewall shows us on this album she can do many things with many different types of prog rock instrumentals and beautiful piano instrumentals as well. It is a glorious listen, one of the best of the decade, and probably will go down as one of the most overlooked of the decade as well. So stop overlooking it and get on it right now. Also want to mention Aries. I love Aries. We've got a soft spot for this kind of style of pop at the moment. Really think this guy's got hooks for days, and he just keeps like proving it as well with singles coming after this album, the album before this album as well. He has really got a knack for hooks, really got a knack for just that youthful energy really exuberating through the music. I think this album's just full of some of my like most favorite, catchiest sing-along, sort of getting drunk and just blasting out every word. You can just sing every word on this album, man. I know it's a really like basic explanation of this album here, but sometimes that feeling you can't get anywhere else. I feel like Aries provides something for me that I just don't get really anywhere else. It's amazing stuff. I know it's not one that people are going to absolutely be head over heels for, but I don't know, I'd go back to it if you didn't like it to begin with. I think there's a lot of legs to this album. I think it can take, it can stand the test of time for me personally, I think. I want to mention Tyler, the Creator. Another one that really grew on me, and then another one that I just sat with over and over again because I was making up for lost time. One of my most played albums ever now, which is mad to think when it first came out, which I did like it, but I wasn't as head over heels for it as some people were. But my general love for Tyler has just increased over the past couple of years, really, and this album's just kind of grown with that love as well to up here. I love Call Me If You Get Lost. I think it's just hype from start to finish. A bit of diversity in the track list as well. Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance, a bit of a detour from the rest of the album really, and Wilshire of course is a bit of a detour too, but yeah, for the most part it's just hungry, energetic. Tyler basically bragging throughout most of this album. He's not really giving us the most well thought out, structured, narrative that we've heard him do before in albums like Igor, for example. But it's just kind of balls to the wall, straight to the point, vicious instrumentals, really hard hitting raps as well. Lumberjack, Corso, so good. Some underrated tracks on here too, like Rise, I think, as well. Yeah, I love this thing. Just kind of brings back that sort of mixtape era, sort of Gangsta Grills feeling that you would have got from the 2000s. It really runs like that, and I think he really channeled that really well into this album as well. Absolutely adore this thing. One of the best rap albums of the decade, easily. Also want to mention Porter Robinson, which I have just found to be one of the most beautifully crafted albums of the decade so far. Another one that I did love when it first came out, but I've grown to appreciate just how starry-eyed everything is and just how glossy everything is. It's just a really, really, really lovely listen. Flows so well. Porter having just such a great resurgence later into his career, because he's always had quite a cult following, but I feel like he's really solidified himself now in the 2020s with albums like this, and of course his most recent one as well, which is a little different. But yeah, absolutely adore this one. So dreamy at times. It's just really, really lovely. And finally, for the detailed one, I want to mention Little Sims. Hard really not to mention Little Sims. I was really shocked to see some lists popping up where Little Sims wasn't even on it at all. I just can't see a world where this isn't considered one of the best rap albums of the decade. I know opinions are opinions, and I'm always championing that on this channel, of course. But this just feels like a no-brainer to me, man. She really stuck out on this album and just went all out with the grandiosity, with the swelling instrumentals, with just rapping over these huge, larger than life instrumentals that she hadn't really done before on tracks like Introvert, you know, and it just really stands out in such a wonderful way. Her rapping is excellent as well. I think there's just so much to like here. Easily the best UK rapper, and probably the best female rapper out there right now too. I know some people don't really like, you know, sort of pigeonholing female rappers into just female rappers. I'm not doing that. I just think, just for, you know, the purpose of highlighting how good she is, I don't think there's any female rapper really coming close to this at the moment. And yeah, in the UK, I think she's completely blowing away the competition as well. She's just one of the best rappers out there, basically. I'm rambling on and on and on, but you get how good she is. Breakance is a vibe of music that I just don't think is really captured anywhere else. I don't think there's anyone out there that really sounds like this. I think he's just got a really cool, like, digital, futuristic style to his sound that I think could potentially become quite prominent later down the line. I think what he was doing on this album still has potential to influence more to come later on, really. Not that he's the only guy doing it, really, but I think he's really fantastic at what he's doing, and just creates such a unique style of music with blending pop and rock and emo and hip-hop elements as well across this entire album to just create the most modern sounding thing you will hear. And it's very hard to kind of just categorize it as one thing. I think the style of his vocals are just so slick. He sounds so cool. He's got such a swag to him that I think is really enjoyable. So much personality. The concept of this album as well, I think got a little bit lost along the way, but I actually really appreciate what he was going for here. I just think Breakance is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, Hypochondriac might not be on your radar for one of the best of the decade at the moment, but I think years down the line, people will go back to this one and go, damn, we kind of got this one wrong. This is actually really brilliant music. I'm just waiting for that to kind of click for a lot of people, but I think Breakance is absolutely exceptional. I want to mention Beyonce as well, Renaissance, a bit of a kind of like, you know, tap in, really, this one. I think this is going to be on pretty much every publication list and a lot of like YouTube critic lists as well. This just is very much doing everything you want to hear from a dance house album. It's pulling from its influences in a great way, in a respectful way, and just spinning it on its head and making it into just a classic Beyonce sounding album. But my God, she didn't have to go this hard. Like, this didn't have to sound this good. Like, how is she able to just completely switch up genres and feel like she's been doing this the whole time? Like, it just felt so seamless, and it's just absolutely fantastic. The way the tracks kind of flow is so good. Instrumentally, it's just so smooth and buttery at times. So many great moments on this album. Bags of character coming through as well. Just absolutely adore this one. I want to mention Gene Dawson, absolutely love this as well. Chaos Now, one of the better rock albums I think of the decade so far. Just has a great youthful edge to it. I think there's a great spirit coming out of this album, and so much variety in the instrumentals as well. Like the final track that kind of goes into like this kind of Irish sound, I think is really fantastic. Yeah, love what Gene is doing. Very much like, you know, everyone that's been hyping up sort of Tizo Touchdown, I feel like are missing out on what Gene is doing, because I think he's just doing everything that Tizo is doing so much better, really. It's got that character, it's got that life in the album. I absolutely love it. Everything, really unique concept for this album too, where they kind of pulled out AI lyrics but did it in such a creative way and created a whole character from it as well. Could be up there with their best, really. I've already done a worst to best for these guys as well. Of course, Get to Heaven was absolutely fantastic, but even this one I don't think it's far behind. I just think what they were able to create with the instrumentals, again, just everything about it sounds so modern. What I was saying about Breakance with it just feels so modern when you hear this. Great, fantastic tracks as well, such as Cut Up, where they just have a lot of energy and a lot of fire coming out of them. Yeah, I absolutely love this one. And the final one I want to mention for the detailed 2022 albums is Big Thief, which, another grower for me. I did like it a lot when it came out, but I remember just thinking it ran a little long. But honestly, going back to it, the length is very hard to feel. Like, you just really get consumed by how comforting and warm and inviting this album is. Like, these instrumentals, these vocals are just so delicate and lovely. One of the best of its kind, I think, in the kind of indie folk genre, really. But yeah, I just found that I could sit through it from front to back and not really feel like I was listening to an hour and like 20 something minute album at all. Just some of their best work pops up on here. The writing's really sharp as well. Adrienne's one of the best songwriters around right now, and musically it sounds fantastic too. '23, we're starting with Sufjan Stevens, who, oh my god, is in the all-time greats discussion, I think now. I think he probably already was after Carrie and Lowell, but then with this album, I think it just is like, wow, like this guy has so much to give and will constantly make incredible music. It's so heartfelt, it's really emotional, and he just pours that into his work in such a stunning way, and it's really hard not to feel something whenever you listen to his music. And that's the other thing about as well with this album, like the way these tracks are arranged, the string arrangements, how everything just feels so huge and cinematic, just really hits the spot. Like, I was really taken aback with some of these tracks, especially paired with his soft voice. He isn't really doing anything new on this album, which I think may be something people might critique him for, but it still does feel a little bit different. Like, it feels like you're combining some of the instrumental palettes of Illinois with the songwriting and lyricism and sadness of Carrie and Lowell, and then you're getting that for the entire album. I think there is something a bit different about this one, but yeah, this guy is a legend of the game now. Incredible stuff. Jessie Ware, I want to mention as well, absolutely adore this one. Just kind of appealed to me more so than What's Your Pleasure did. What's Your Pleasure is a cult classic, and I know that some people don't think That Feels Good is as good, but for me personally, my taste in classic like funk music, soul music from the 70s and 80s, Jessie is really channeling that on this album. I mean, the first track has the funkiest bass line I think I've heard all decade. It's absolutely ridiculously groovy, and I just think that sound of music appeals to me as a listener quite a bit more than maybe the sultry disco stuff that she gave us on What's Your Pleasure. So if you're wondering why that's not there and this one is, I'm just explaining myself here, because good god, anything that reminds me of like Shaka Khan, like Rick James, you know, even some of Michael Jackson, the Isley Brothers, like anything that just channels that funk, that groove, that soul, I'm just all over. And I think Jessie Ware captures that so wonderfully on this album, and has to be one of the decade highlights. Also a bit of a no-brainer, similar to Beyonce, where I feel like this is just going to be seen on every list. Caroline Polachek. Yeah, good god. Just a voice, a generational voice. I mean, you just do not come across singers like this very often. She is just able to hit notes that you just didn't even think existed. It's absolutely incredible. But again, she ain't just a voice. She has so much going for her on this album. The array of styles and influences coming through, and the instrumentals like on tracks like Sunset, Welcome to the Island, Welcome to My Island, yeah, Bunny is a Rider, just such a vast array of different things, I believe, which has a bit more of a drum and bass feel to it. Really cool stuff. I just think she's able to capture so many sounds on one album and do them so well in a way that most artists wouldn't really be able to do across like 5 albums, honestly, but yet she did it on one album, which is mad. Should be a much bigger artist than she is, and yeah, absolutely adore it. Black Country New Road, I know some people might have thought, why are you saying this one but not Ants from Up There? Just a bit of a personal opinion here for me. I just like this one more. I think it just was a really joyous, instrumentally lovely album. I think they just kind of captured that chamber pop feel in just a really beautiful way. I thought the vocals really added a lot of depth to this album. I was really surprised by. Of course, Isaac was such a unique force for them, and of course their music was really good before this album too, but to say that he left and they never really like lost much, really, like they lost the personality of him, of course, but I just think the other members coming through offering some really beautiful vocal performances added a lot to this album. I think I just kind of appreciate a little bit more of the chamber pop sound. It kind of hits me a little bit more than maybe other genres do. So I was really all over this one. I think it's fantastic, and it doesn't really sound like a live album anyway. It just sounds like they were performing this, and it's a studio release. If you weren't hearing the audience clapping after each song, I'd have just thought this was a friggin' recorded album. It sounds that good. Also, for the 2023 releases, I'm going to finish off with McKinley Dixon. Wasn't as high on my 2023 year-end list as this, but really grown to love this one. I think the production is absolutely stellar. I think his rapping is absolutely fantastic as well. So much going for him. Ridiculous how underrated he is, really. He isn't really talked about that much by anyone ever. But yeah, I think McKinley is one of the best in hip-hop at the moment. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And for the 2024 releases, it will come as no shock or surprise to anybody that Magdalena Bay is getting a mention here, because I absolutely love that one. This is absolutely up there, one of the best pop albums of the decade. Good grief. This is just such a sugar high from start to end. It kind of meanders and goes through different passages in some places as well. But God, they're so good at making a pop tune, aren't they? Like, it's ridiculous how good they are on songs like Image, the final two tracks, which I think are absolutely fantastic as well. Love Is Everywhere, Death and Romance. My God, hit after hit after hit on this album. There is very huge potential for them to kind of capture a bit of a cult following through a TikTok hit or something. I don't know if it's going to happen at any point, but I just feel like there is a world where these guys could become much bigger than they are. Because you can't keep making songs that sound this good and not get anywhere with it. Like, this is just too good to be true for me. Adore it. Parannoul, absolutely shocked by how much of a force this album is. Like, it really is just such a wall of noise from start to end. It gets a little noisy at times, and I think that could put people off a little bit, but I thought it was produced really well. I didn't particularly have any issues with the mixing, which I know some people did. I thought it was really, really fantastic. It kind of reminded me of Walrus, which is one of my favourite Japanese shoegaze bands. They've got one of my favourite albums of all time, and that kind of style being emulated on this one here just really lifted my spirits. I thought tracks like Backwards were just sensational. Yeah, the really long, lengthy tracks as well, I thought were really cool. To say it's just one guy doing it, I'm very impressed by it. Charlie XCX, hard not to mention Charlie XCX with Bratz. The thing that I love about this as well is that it's just Charlie unapologetically being herself, and she's gained so much success from it, which I think is fantastic. The authenticity coming through of her being herself, and yet everybody just kind of taking it on board and just welcoming it with huge open arms, and it being such a massive like cultural force of 2024 with the Brat Summer stuff and all of the TikToks and the dances that went along with some of the songs too. I'm so happy to see it. Like, it's great, because I think she lost a part of herself with the self-titled album and Crash. It felt a little bit more like the label was kind of pushing her to be something she wasn't quite, and yet when she's just fully being herself, she puts out her most successful album and one of her best albums as well too, which is absolutely amazing to see. Yeah, even if it hadn't become such a meme or a force in the culture of 2024, this would still be on this list. Like, the music is just that good. Like, it was already fantastic. The production is fantastic. The writing at times is really vulnerable, really on point. She gets down dirty in some of the specifics as well, which I really appreciate. What an album from Charlie XCX, man. And it is as good for me as everybody is saying it is. Vince Staples, want to mention as well. Absolutely love what he was doing on this album. I think he's always been a great rapper, but I just think recently he's been really, really hitting the spot with just going really dark and really, really gloomy with his writing. He is just not holding back anymore. He's saying everything as it is. He's talking about the environment he's surrounded by as it is, and it gets pretty dark and depressing on this album. But yeah, I love the West Coast flair that comes through on some of these tracks, like Etouffee, however you say that one, Little Homies. Love that, but also love how willing he is to just get really straight to the point and dark as well. Absolutely adore this one. And the final one I want to mention in the detailed 2024 albums is No Worries, which is the Anderson .Paak Knowledge collaboration. I was surprised they were able to surpass Yes Lord. I thought that was just a great lightning in a bottle moment, and just captured and capped off a great 2016 run for Anderson .Paak. But honestly, yeah, Why Lord I think might be better. I think Anderson .Paak going really, really emotional and pouring out his soul onto that album just added to the beauty of the music, because the production is just amazing. Knowledge is just that good anyway. But when Anderson .Paak is just kind of yearning and speaking on some really heavy topics that have happened through his personal life, breakups and that kind of thing, like, he is really coming through from the soul on that album, man. He is not letting anything up. And yeah, absolutely adore it. I think the production, I think the rapping in place as well, like from the features and the singing, is just really, really exquisite. It sounds fantastic. And that's all the 2024 albums. And not only the 2024 albums, but also all of the albums from the 2020 so far that I adore and I think are up there with the very best. Of course, this isn't some objective list that I think I'm telling you this is the definitive, has to be the list. I'm only one guy. This is the best list in my opinion. These are all my picks. If you have different picks, would love to see what you think. Of course, opinions are differing all over the internet, so there's going to be some that you want to see that didn't turn up, but I'm sure there are plenty that you've seen here that you haven't heard. So please, before you jump down my throat, check out some of these albums. You might get some great recommendations from me here. So yes, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What would your list be? What's your favorite out of all my picks here? And again, make sure you subscribe, make sure you're keeping up with all the content. And yeah, thank you as always. 2020 so far, the best of them. Check out the songs video as well. Have a good day. Goodbye.